welcome to this. And this is going to be the response to LV, or just more of a response so that LV's video can get more views, because LV's video was awesome. And then there was Nightmare, who I hope Nightmare did his video as a response to LV's as well, because Nightmare's video was awesome. What it was it was on the subject, because most of you are not going to see LV's videos, because LV made the cardinal mistake of calling out Spinnernet, and Spinnernet told you all that you shouldn't listen to him, so none of you did. Idiots. Anyways, LV made the point, and he's made this point before. Some of us have I've made this point. I made this point about, I think, a year ago, probably a year and a half ago. Jared has made this point again before. Many of us have made this point. So I figured, since everyone seemed to like the fact that the point was being made, I'd come on here and make the point as well, to bring even more attention to the point. And you guys can see their videos as well and see what they said as well, because I can tell you their videos were far better than mine, because I've talked, I feel like, enough about this where I feel like it's ad nauseum. So it's just me talking about it again. If this comes off as me being a dick, I'm sorry. It's just kind of the way it's going to be, because it's kind of the way I feel about this. It's one of the reasons why I don't like talking about it a lot, because some of you get offended when I talk about it. But what the whole video is about is this: is people bitching about TNA, bitching about WWE, and then not willing to watch anything else or spend their money on anything else but WWE and TNA. That is counterproductive. Listen, most of the fans that were fans during the Attitude Era, guess what? They went because they didn't like the WWE anymore, or they didn't like where the WWE was going anymore, went and spent their money elsewhere. That's where most of us went and spent their money. They went and spent their money in the UFC, because the UFC is actually putting on a wrestling product that actually works and is entertaining and has characters and is all of these other things that WWE should be and is not. Same thing with TNA, because guys are allowed to be themselves for the most part. I know some people don't like hearing that. I know UFC and I know a lot of MMA fans hate hearing that, because they hate hearing that, you know, MMA is pro wrestling. But it is pro wrestling. I'm sorry, it is. That's what it is. Particularly, you know, Ultimate Fighter is nothing more than a pro wrestling show. That is what it is. It just so happens that the wrestling is real. That's it. That's the only difference. Sorry. But that's where most of them went. Then there's the rest of it. There's us that are diehards, such as myself. I love MMA, but I will sit here and tell you that a pro wrestling match, a great pro wrestling match, will entertain me far more than a great MMA match ever will. It just will. It always will. Usually I can only watch a great MMA match maybe once or twice, maybe once every once in a while, again and again. A great pro wrestling match I can watch numerous times, and it still entertains me. It's the same thing with a boxing match. I can watch a great boxing match maybe once, maybe twice, and it just doesn't do the same thing for me that a pro wrestling match does. That's why back in, we'll say I guess in the midst of the invasion angle, when it was evident that it was sucky and it wasn't very good, and I was just kind of and much like Nightmare, ECW was dead, and that did affect me a lot, because I loved ECW, and it was I've said this before, I believe, I'll say it again. I didn't just drink the Kool-Aid. I drank it, I bathed in it, I was baptized in it to a degree, I gave it to my friends, I baptized and bathed them in it to a large degree. I did, like so many other people, lived and died by ECW. I loved ECW. Even when it sucked, I still felt it was, or I shouldn't say sucked, that even when it was on its downward spiral, I still felt it was entertaining, and I still liked a lot of the things about it. Felt it could be better, but there were still lots of things I liked about it over WCW, of course, particularly when WCW was dying, and even in the Attitude Era to a degree, because there were things with the WWE, particularly even at the tail end of the Attitude Era, that I just didn't really like. There was stuff that I liked, but there was a lot of stuff I didn't like as well. And with ECW, it wasn't that way. So when it went away, that did affect me as a wrestling fan. Now, the other side of that is that I still watched wrestling. I just watched more Japanese wrestling. I knew how to get a hold of it. You just couldn't download it or anything, really. You still had to go out and buy DVDs or buy tapes. DVDs were just now becoming where you could actually buy them off of people. So you still had all of that. So still, I still followed a lot of it, and then so there was all of that still kind of going on. There was still a lot of, when the WWE would come out with video with DVDs, I would buy a lot of the DVDs. So there was still stuff that I watched, particularly stuff that I liked. But, as I've said before, I started watching Ring of Honor. I started watching, I had watched IW Mid-South to a degree. I watched some CZW when CZW was actually not just garbage wrestling and actually had some other wrestling in it, when people would tell me, hey, you need to check this out. There was still lots of stuff going on in Japan that I watched. I found other things to watch because the WWE really wasn't being what I wanted the WWE to be. So I went and found something I wanted. Okay, I watched TNA when TNA first started. Didn't think it was the greatest thing in the world, even back then, but it was different, and there was stuff on it that I liked, and I thought that maybe it could grow into something great, but I still think to this point it just has kind of just gone and get a little bump, and then it just kind of came back down, but for the most part I think you've just been a straight line. I don't think you've seen any, as far as entertainment purposes, as far as how much I'm entertained by it, a huge growth. Just don't. Have never seen it for the most part. I got good once, and then it came back down, so it's been pretty much a straight line. So what did I do? As I said, started watching, Ring of Honor. When people told me, hey, you need to check out Pro Wrestling Guerrilla, I did. I checked out Pro Wrestling Guerrilla. Got the first Battle of Los Angeles, which is a great DVD. First kind of got me into Pro Wrestling Guerrilla. I have a love-hate relationship with Pro Wrestling Guerrilla because there's a lot of matches that I like in Pro Wrestling Guerrilla. There's a lot of shows that I probably like more, but as I have always said, the lack of fan interaction for a large part on a lot of the shows just kills it for me, and I just can't watch it. It just doesn't enjoy. Now, that said, I will sit here and say I've not done a review of the show, and I want to do a review of the show. DDT4 from this year is an amazing show. It is an awesome show, and people should go check it out because it is just an amazing show that you should see. There's that. There's the fact that so many of you came on here and talked about the fact that you loved Dragon Gate. You thought Dragon Gate was like the greatest thing ever, or the Dragon Gate pay-per-view. Yet, how many of you then turned around and bought Pro Wrestling Guerrilla DVDs that had the Dragon Gate guys on it? How many of you went out and bought the ROH DVDs that maybe you didn't have, that had a lot of Dragon Gate guys on it? How many of you went to High Spots or ROH and bought the Best of Dragon Gate, which is a DVD that they both carry, which is just pure Dragon Gate stuff? How many of you bought that? I'm sure most of you didn't. How many of you actually bought the pay-per-view? That's the other thing. How many of you actually bought it? I know some of you say, I couldn't buy it, wasn't available in my area. I know the people in the UK couldn't buy it. So here's my question. Did you then go to the website, buy a shirt, buy something that you could, are you something along those lines? Are you going to buy the DVD when the DVD comes out? Are you going to go that route? Are you going to give the company your money because you have to do that? If it was something you liked so much, you need to give them your money. Because guess what? If they don't get the money, you're not going to get the shows that you loved so much. For the ones on the East Coast, are you going to go out and go to their next show, which they're going to crown their champion? It's a gay, tournament, which is, but we'll wait and see. It's a pretty stacked tournament, but there's that. So, are you guys willing to put your money where your mouth is? Because if you're not, then that to me is where the bitching bothers me. It bothers me when I review these great shows, or people hear that there was this great show, and all I see is, where can I download the show? Where can I download the show? Go buy the show. That's why I reviewed it. That's why I gave it that's why I told you to go buy it, was for you to buy it. Not to go download it, not for you to find it on YouTube somewhere, not for you to find it on the internet somewhere so you don't have to pay for it for free. Go buy it. I don't watch Raw. I'm making this video pretty much near the end of Raw, but I haven't watched Raw tonight. I don't usually watch Raw. I DVR it, And if I hear there's something really great on it because it's live, I'll go back and maybe I'll watch that one thing. But for the most part, I fast forward through 90% of Raw. I fast forward through about 75% of Impact on most weeks because I get bored with it, or I don't think it's entertaining, or whatever. I watch most of ECW. I watch most of SmackDown. I watch all of ROH. For everyone that always says, I don't have HDNet. I can't get HDNet. Guess what? ROH Brazil. It's here on YouTube. You can watch the shows here on YouTube. You can watch them. They're on YouTube. You can watch the shows. Go watch the shows. How many of you are going to actually go out as soon as Death Before Dishonor comes out? Yes, I did forget that it was a named show and it was Death Before Dishonor. Don't do videos in the middle of the night, or that's what happens. But go out and buy that show. By all accounts, that sounds like an awesome show. And guess what? The Boston show before it sounds awesome as well. Go and buy that. There have been lots of great ROH shows this year. I have not been able to see, or I'm in the middle of watching End of an Age, which everyone has raved about. There's been lots of great shows this year. How many of you have gone out and bought them? How many of you have tried to go out and buy them? Not everyone has all. How many people are going to look at the list on my page of that video with the list of ROH DVDs? How many of you have all those DVDs? You can go out and buy during the Big Ten shows, and yes, they're year-old shows, but you can go out and buy 5 shows for the amount, probably 6 shows, really, depending on how taxes work from your where you're at for your pay-per-views, because you do have to pay taxes, and they're insane taxes on pay-per-views. How many shows basically can you buy? You could spend the same money you would buy for a TNA or WWE pay-per-view and buy 3 to 6 shows, depending, of ROH DVDs that are great, that are amazingly great, and are probably far better than anything TNA or WWE has put on in 2-3 years. You can easily do that. It drives me insane when I see people who come on here and bitch and complain and moan, but they're not willing to do something about it. Guess what? Don't spend your money on WWE stuff that you don't like. I have been called anti-TNA. I've been called biased against TNA. Yet, I probably own about 30 of their DVDs, because there's about 30 of their DVDs that I think are good. I have a lot of WWE DVDs, because guess what? They're good. I have even more Ring of Honor DVDs, because it's Ring of Honor, and it's kind of how it is, because of that. Do I have a lot of Pro Wrestling Guerrilla DVDs? Not really, but I do have a pretty good number. I've got about 20 Chikara DVDs, but as I've always said, I don't go out and I don't talk about Chikara a lot, because Chikara is kind of like, it's not for everybody, and I know that, and not everyone's going to like it. That said, guess what? Chikara, right now, you can go to smartmarkvideo.com. $2! $2! You can get a sampler DVD of Chikara, and you can see if you like it, for $2! $2, you can do this. What else are you going to spend $2 on? A candy bar? I mean, come on. There's that. There's all this stuff that you can spend your money on that so many of you just don't do. Why? I don't know. I guess because it's easier to just come on here and bitch and moan about pro wrestling instead of actually doing something to try to fix what is wrong with pro wrestling, i.e. spend money on good pro wrestling. Is it going to change things overnight? No, it's not. But guess what? Back in the day, when WCW was shit and WWE was horrid, okay, there was this little company called ECW, and all of a sudden the internet exploded, or didn't explode, but started getting bigger, and everyone started talking about this little company called ECW, because people were like, you need to watch this because this is good stuff, and people started watching this good stuff, and people were like, wow, look at that. And on WCW's side, Eric Bischoff realized that people were on the internet talking about all of these guys from Japan, all of these Americans from Japan, and decided, you know what, let's bring those guys over. They looked over and saw what Conan and the guys were doing down in AAA at the time, and said, you know what, let me bring those guys up as well, because people, well, not Bischoff, but Paul Heyman said that. And then Bischoff took the idea. there needs to be a progression in pro wrestling. We have not seen it because Vince McMahon is always going to take the safe road. TNA, for whatever reason, doesn't realize that they have to do something different and radical, and you can't rely on the old guard to necessarily take you into the future. You take the old guard to help you get to the future, but often you have to propel the old guard behind them with new and inventive things. That's how you change pro wrestling. So, you know what? Go out and watch more pro wrestling. Most of you have access to AAA. Most of you could watch AAA, I would imagine, particularly those of you in the United States. It's either on Galvision or Univision. I can never remember which. I DVR it every weekend. I watch it, fast forward through a good portion of it, but there is a lot of it that I watch because there is good lucha on there. Not as good as what would be on CMLL, but CMLL, for anyone that tries to find it, knows it's not the easiest thing to find on the internet. And the wrestling is not as good, but I don't understand Spanish, so most of the crazy storylines don't make any sense to me anyways. But there is good wrestling on there. There's good women's wrestling on there. If you like women's wrestling, you should definitely be watching AAA, in my opinion, because there's enough good. It's at least better than the Knockouts and the Divas, which is not that that's hard. There's that. It's easy to find Japanese stuff on YouTube. You can easily find the stuff on YouTube. Go find it. Go find it. Watch it. That's all you have to do. Yes, you can't support those companies from over here. That's evident. You really can't do that. But if one of those guys happens to come over here, go buy a ticket to that show if you're able to go do it. Go buy it. Go buy a ticket to the show and help support the company that brought them over. All of those sorts of things. Liger's going to be in LA, this Christmas, I think, for a PWG show and for an ROH show that they're doing in LA, I believe. He's going to be there. I would hope that all of the people that are on the West Coast that can go to that show would go to that show so they could say, hey, I saw Liger live one time. It's Liger, for God's sakes. Go and watch it. For all of you that, want to see Mystico and you try to find stuff to go see Mystico. Try to go find stuff that you want to watch. Don't just bitch about the stuff you feel like you have to watch. I'll be honest. The reason why I do WWE pay-per-views, and this is why I do WWE pay-per-views, is so that I have a bigger forum, so that when I recommend these smaller stuff, I can give it to as many people as possible. That's the truth. TNA pay-per-views, I'll be honest. If I'm not feeling it after Bound for Glory, I don't know if I'm going to do any more TNA pay-per-views, because this year has sucked so royally, in my opinion, when it comes to pay-per-views. It seems like I feel like I'm wasting my time even watching the pay-per-views, even though I'm just watching them just to come on here and do reviews. Not because I feel like I have to, but because I know people like them and I know people want my opinions on it. So I feel like, I'm not really doing anything on Sundays anyways due to my life and the way the work schedule works. Just kind of the way it is. That's the way it works. Okay? Come on. Honestly, folks, most of you have a DVR, I would imagine. Or I would say probably a lot of you have DVRs. What does your DVR look like when it comes to pro wrestling? Does it have Raw? Does it have ECW? I'll tell you what this is what my DVR has. It's Raw, then it goes ECW, then we have Impact. There's ROH in the other room where the HD TV is. There's that. There's SmackDown. I think I already said Impact. Then there's AAA, and I still have the NWA Showcase on my DVR as well. So that's a lot of wrestling that you can go through and watch and see if you can find something you like. The pro wrestling, the NWA Showcase has the Young Bucks on it. Young Bucks are awesome. The Young Bucks are something to watch. They're worth watching. There's all of that stuff. And it is retarded to me to come on here and bitch and whine and then not give an alternative for something to watch. Not to say, go watch, Nightmare brought up a great point. He talked about Kenta. Kenta's having such a freaking year, he could, get hurt tomorrow, and guess what? He'd probably still win Wrestler of the Year. Because, go look at my top 10. Go look at my top 10 and look how many times he pops up on my top 10. It is ridiculous. It's ridiculous. You know, I mean, good Lord. And how many of you have actually seen any of those matches? You honestly should ask yourself, how many of you have seen those matches? I have a Chikara match in my top 10. I believe it's still there. You know, that's there. You know, Nightmare brought up another good point. If you like hardcore wrestling, if you feel like, you know, I like hardcore wrestling, that's what I like, go watch some Big Japan. That's hardcore. That is good hardcore. That's not CZW. That is good hardcore wrestling, insane, ultra-violent wrestling, which is done in a way that you don't feel brain dead after watching it. There's all of that stuff. And trust me, you know, the economy hurts everybody. You know, we don't have, supposedly, if everything keeps going the way it's going to go, we're not going to have IWA Mid-South anymore. That's a big loss for a lot of us, because that means the Ted Petty tournament is gone. Okay? That was a great leaping pad for a lot of young talent. I don't know if an indie's going to be able to pop up to replace that, but that's not what Bola is. You know, that's kind of what the Young Lions Cup is in Chikara, but it is a little different. So it's one of those things. I don't see a company coming up to do something that's going to replace it. And that's unfortunate. But anyways, like I said, I did this video because LV was right, Nightmare was right. I believe somebody did a response to Nightmare, which was absolutely right. The fact of the matter is, there's enough wrestling out there, you can find something you like. All you have to do is look for it. And look for it, and you know what? If you find something you truly enjoy and you think people should be watching it, there's a video. There's a video camera. You can make a text video. You can do some way to let people know that, wow, watch this stuff. This stuff I thought was great, and more people should be watching it. That's not hard. And, you know, make sure that you're getting people to buy the products. Now, like I said, Japanese, that's the Japanese stuff, that's going to be hard to do. But, hey, you know, if at the very least, you can at least go to High Spots and try to get High Spots to, you know, if High Spots sell some of those DVDs so that they keep selling the DVDs, or go to IVP.com and try to get them to, you know, if they're releasing the shows, so that they keep releasing the shows so that you can get access to the shows if you can't download them. There's ways to get a hold of stuff. You just have to find, ways, but you cannot forget to actually go out and spend money on the stuff you can spend money on, and give these companies your money. Because if you don't, well, guess what? You are going to be left with only WWE. You are only going to be left with WWE or TNA. That's what you're going to be left with if you don't spend the money. And that's just the truth. I've rambled on long enough. I'm sorry. With that, I'm out. Late.